Now, a type of collector that I really respect is somebody that is looking at a specific budget in mind and trying to maximize their dollar amount. And today we're going to be looking at a price segment that I think is a great one to look at if you're looking for, say, your first luxury watch or to add a luxury watch to your collection, and that is $6,000. In this video, we're going to be looking at this price segment, looking at some of the definitive watches in the dive category, the dress category, everyday category, GMTs, and then also chronographs. Last year, I believe we released a $5,000 watch version. So if you want to check that out to see some watches that are slightly less money, you can go ahead and look at that. For this video, we're looking at all of these different categories and then also going to be keeping retail pricing in mind for consistency because the volatility of the secondary market is all over the place. I don't want to mention something that then later becomes not available in this price range. So that's just going to keep us honest. And then for prices, I'm going to be looking at primarily the range of $5,500 to $6,500. There might be some slight wiggle outside of that budget on either side, but for the most part, this is really where I'm going to try to pinpoint. Now, despite looking at watches here that are in an elevated price point, I think everybody needs a watch that they can wear a bit more carefree, maybe call it a beater, whatever you want to call it, but or even just a staple in your collection that you can just have fun with and doesn't need to be coddled around. And for that, I want to give a shout to a new model on TeddyBaldassarre.com that just became available, the new Seiko 5KX collection, the 38mm Seiko 5 sports models. Now available for summer in a variety of different colors. When these were initially unveiled, the larger sizes back in 2019, there were immediate requests to get a smaller case size because the 42.5 millimeters, despite wearing much smaller than that on wrist, might have been too large for some. A few years later, we finally got our answer with the 38mm option coming in a variety of different dial colors at the initial launch: an orange dial, teal green, off-white, and black. If you want to check these out, they'll be in the description down below on TeddyBaldassarre.com. Definitely give them a look. Now, to kick us off here, I'm going to look at the dive category. The watch here that I think is a definitive one in this $5,000, $6,000 range is the Omega Seamaster Diver 300. This is a watch that is probably setting the standard for what a watch for this price should feel, it should look like, and just ultimately bring to the table across the board when you're looking at the specifications. $5,600 on bracelet, 42mm case with the helium escape valve on that opposite side. So if you are measuring it to its farthest extended point, it will be a little bit larger, but lug to lug pretty reasonable for a 42mm case at 49.7 millimeters, 300 meters of water resistance, so no surprise there. And then automatic 8800 on the inside from Omega, coaxial escapement, MEDAS certified movement. This model family has become a classic since the 1990s, basically being solidified forever after the 1995 GoldenEye release, being worn by Pierce Brosnan in the movie. Now the current generation is a best-selling model for Omega, pretty much probably only second to the Omega Speedmaster. Next, we have another Omega, and they absolutely dominate in this price segment. We're gonna be looking at the Omega Planet Ocean. The 39mm, 39.5 to be exact, I think is one that gets glossed over quite a bit. And I also think that when looking at the Planet Ocean line, people forget how many different options. And I think this is almost to a fault of Omega because they almost make too many watches or just have too many active references going on at one given moment that it almost overwhelms a consumer. But once you're able to break things down, identify what's available to you, it's great to get lost in and see that you have this many options as an enthusiast. This piece comes with a 39.5mm case, pretty reasonable thickness despite having 600 meters of water resistance, automatic 8800 on the inside, some different dial colors to choose from in this 39mm configuration. The Planet Ocean line was released in 2005 and was actually the first dive watch from Omega to contain the coaxial movement. It now serves as their pretty much ultimate professional dive watch. They also use this collection as a way to do these daring expeditions. Look at the Omega Ultra Deep models that pretty much fall underneath the Planet Ocean DNA, and is probably the forgotten pillar within Omega's Seamaster collection. This next watch is one of my personal favorites from Breitling. I think it's glossed over by many enthusiasts and is one of their best propositions, maybe their best proposition in terms of value outside of some of their chronographs. This is their Breitling Super Ocean Heritage with the B20 movement on the inside. 42 millimeter case. There are different versions available, but I think 42 is probably what most people watching are going to probably prefer. 14.2 millimeters in thickness and a lug to lug of 51 millimeters. Whereas like a 41.5 to 42 millimeters, so pretty true to size. Depending on the strap option, does wear smaller. 200 meters of water resistance, and the movement on the inside is actually a MT5612 produced by Canisi or Tudor. This was the exchanging of technologies between Tudor and Breitling. Tudor received the B01 from Breitling, and in turn, Breitling is utilizing the MT5612 inside here. I personally would love to see them utilize this movement more outside of just this collection, but it is a phenomenal looking watch. I love the look of the large sword hour hand, the minute hand, and how just legible it is, the text on the dial. I like how it's so old school. Personally, my favorite Super Ocean. And then for our last dive watch here, we have the IWC Aqua Timer. So this is a model family that extends back to 1967 with that original version. Originally had this dual compressor style case. It has the Cousteau connection, a lot to like in terms of diving pedigree. And the other thing that is cool about this watch is the 5-day power reserve. One of the more entry-level IWC watches outside of their Spitfires and some of their Mark 20s. And also you're getting a very distinct rotation of that bezel, which is unique to the Aqua Timer range. Next, we shift over to dress watches. And for the first dress watch on this list, I almost want to argue now that this could be the best value for a dress watch in today's market. With JLC now extending up in price, you used to be able to get the Master Collection all day in this price range. Nowadays, you're seeing some of those watches around $8,000 plus. Verso the same case. This though, now you're delivering basically a movement that I would argue is one of the best finished movements under $10,000, and you're getting it just under $6,500. This is an absolute steal. This is the Glasuta Original 60s. 39 millimeter case, couple different dial colors to choose from, 9.4 millimeters in thickness, a lug to lug of 45.5 millimeters. But the movement, the 3952, this is coming with a beautiful, beautiful array of finishes, skeletonized rotor with that double G symbol, a 21 karat gold oscillating weight, swan neck regulator and fine-tune adjustment, Glasuta ribs across the bridges. This is an artisanally finished style movement at a price that is typically more industrialized and usually what you can expect. Absolutely phenomenal watch, has that classic 1960s design on the dial. Some people are gonna say this looks like a Timex Marlin, but I mean, if you're looking at the history of GO, you'll understand that there's a lot to go along with this design. Simplistic, beautiful, no nonsense. Pretty much all that you would want from a dress watch that punches way above its weight. For our next piece, we have the Cartier Santos Dumont, and I was questioning whether or not to put this in the dress category or not, but I think it fits for this particular version of the Santos. If you're looking at the Santos de Cartier, I think that has some sporty upside with 100 meters of water resistance. In this case, 30 meters of water resistance, classical with its Roman numerals and its crown and how this one looks. So where this watch gets its name is from Alberto Santos Dumont. He was an heir to a Brazilian coffee growing empire in the early 20th century. He was a pioneer also though of aeronautical pursuits in the early 20th century in Paris and befriended Louis Cartier of Cartier. He was flying around Paris doing a bunch of different activities. He actually flew around the Eiffel Tower in 1901, and eventually he reached out and asked to Louis Cartier, I need a watch to be flying around for my next expedition. I can't be pulling it out of my pocket. And that's where Cartier came in and produced this watch. So very iconic in terms of what it was demonstrating in the early days of wristwatches, 7.5 millimeters in thickness and a water resistance rating of 30 meters. And then inside the manual 430 MC caliber. For the next piece here, we have a watch from Zenith, and Zenith typically is associated with their El Primero calibers. Here we have a model known as the Elite Classic. The Elite movement being utilized on the inside is the Elite 670. This comes with a 40 millimeter case, relatively thin case at that at 9.1 millimeters with decent water resistance of 50 meters and a sapphire crystal on top. The Elite family of calibers really started to ascend in the 1990s, being more of their ultra thin 3-hand calibers seen in models like these refined pieces that you have here. You also have the moon phase options that are going to be slightly more. These come with this rib finish dial, very straightforward 3-hand, and again, just one of these no nonsense dress watches watches that I think looks very nice. Now we shift over to the next category of everyday watches, and to kick us off, we have the Omega Aquaterras, the different colorful dials known as the Shades edition. So this is a watch that was, or a family of watches that were released last year. Very slow rollout, and it was having me just questioning what was going on. I think there was some production delays going on with Omega, but one other thing, and I don't know if this is the reason why there was some holdup, but you might remember where these watches didn't have a frame date window on the dials. Now they do, and it seems like they're finally delivering to different authorized dealers, which I'm very happy about because these were some of my favorite watches from last year. I liked what they did, I like what they represented. I of course know where they're coming from in terms of taking the Rolex Oyster Perpetual lane and then also doing it for themselves. Different dial process here and creating these really striking approaches. The terracotta version, it is so eye-catching when you see this, and I honestly want to get one. I really love these. 38 millimeters. One thing I will mention though, I think people are thinking these are direct replacement compared to some of the older 38 millimeter teak wood type of dials from the collection. Those still remain. So it's not to say that this is just the only thing available to you. This is in addition to that. So I think some of that criticism where people are like, oh, this is the new direction of the Aquaterra, they're getting all mad. That's not necessarily the case. This is just a approach within the Aquaterra family. 13.2 millimeters in thickness, water resistance of 150 meters, and inside you have the Omega 8800 caliber. 5 different dial colors to choose from at 38, and then at 34 you also will have some different options with different dial colors as well, 5 there. And speaking of the Oyster Perpetual, we have them here next as being another definitive leader in this price category. These are now the entry-level position for Rolex nowadays. There was a little bit of fighting back and forth with the Air King back in the day, but now the Oyster Perpetual is that entry door into the world of Rolex. Depending on the case size, we'll determine that price, but you're right around $6,000 to get in the door for one of these at retail prices, which I probably should put that in quotes. The original Oyster Perpetual has a long history with its water resistance dating back to 1926, 70-hour power reserve, movements on the inside, many different dial colors and different configurations that you can go for. And if you can get one of these watches at retail, probably still one of the best values in all of watchmaking. For our next piece, we have the IWC Mark 20. So this was unveiled last year with a really kind of silent type of release strategy. It was strange because it just came out of nowhere. Nobody had the pieces in hand. It was just like a press release blast, and everyone's like, wait, it's finally here. This looks great on paper. And after handling them, I think IWC did a phenomenal job in extending this collection to, I think, new heights beyond what the Mark 18 was doing. So the Mark 18 and basically shifted over and jumped a whole number to the Mark 20 in terms of where this language is coming from, really from a history of pilot watches that dates back to 1936 from IWC, originally unveiling the reference 436 in 1936, and then they shifted into creating Beware watches during World War II, establishing that Flieger DNA alive and well all these years later. The watch has a more condensed lug-to-lug compared to the Mark 18, 40 millimeter case, 10.9 millimeters in thickness, 100 meters of water resistance, which is a huge upgrade compared to the previous version. And then also on the inside, an upgraded movement with the IWC 32111 with a 5-day power reserve. And then for our final 2 everyday watches, these both come from Grand Seiko. I have one high beat, one spring drive. Let's start with the spring drive because this is the no-brainer that falls in this range. Some of the 4 Seasons spring drive are just above the $6,500 price range. So we're gonna be looking at the Grand Seiko Snowflake, the SBGA 211. This is the watch that really put Grand Seiko on the map. The Snowflake has lineage dating back to 2005 with the SBGA 011, but it really took off under the later design of the 211 in the 2010s. And in doing so, simultaneously established Grand Seiko on a larger international stage. 70+ hour power reserve, the 9R65 movement is one of the coolest points of engineering under $10,000, and maybe in all of watchmaking. The tri-synchro regulator, how this works is simply phenomenal. You're basically getting mechanical energy, quartz oscillation with no friction to create a marvel of a watch movement. If you don't know how the spring drive works, I'd recommend checking out my video explaining how that works in more detail. Titanium case, a dial also that is understated. It has restraint and beauty, but also when you see it up close is very eye-catching. Where the dial inspiration comes from is the snow outside of their Shinshu watch studio, and I think they absolutely nailed it. And then for a high beat model, we look at the Grand Seiko SBGH273. This is known as the Autumn. This comes with the 62GS case, 40 millimeters, much smaller than the Snowflake on wrist. I love how this watch wears. 47 millimeters, water resistance of 100 meters, and a 9S85 movement on the inside. This is the high beat, a 55-hour power reserve. I think one thing that's happened with Grand Seiko, which is now pretty interesting, is the spring drive is, yes, deserves all of its acclaim, but because of how much of that name just is so recognizable in affiliation with Grand Seiko, people forget the history associated with their high beat movements of years prior. This is one of their more entry-level positions to get in one of their high beats, and is well done at that, well-finished movement with that 9S85, and one of the few luxury brands actually utilizing 36,000 vibration per hour movements. Now we shift over to GMTs, and we want to mention one Tudor. This is the only Tudor that falls in this range. This is the Tudor Black Bay GMT, the S&G model. So this was unveiled in 2022, now one of a few additions to the GMT line that originated in the Black Bay collection back in 2018. It has this black and brown with gold tone accents. The center links are gold, the bezel edge is gold, and then also the crown. Comes with the conventional case. Apart from that, in terms of its dimension set, 41 millimeters, thickness of 15 millimeters, and lug to lug of 49 millimeters. 200 meters of water resistance, hence the Black Bay affiliation. So you're getting the full capacity there in terms of water resistance, and more than you could ever ask for. And then on the inside, the MT5652, the standard true GMT movement seated within these Tudors, COSC certified, 70 hours plus of power reserve with an SI balance spring on the inside. So next up, we have the Breitling Chronomat GMT. So this comes in with a 40 millimeter case, thickness of 11.7 millimeters, and a lug to lug of a very wearable 47.4 millimeters with water resistance of 200 meters. The Chronomat family probably is best defined by its bullet bracelet of the 1980s fanfare. I love the look and size of this case. I think this is so distinctive for Breitling and their design DNA. The only downside I'll mention about this watch, I think, really is just the caliber on the inside. It's not that it's a bad movement by any means, but you're now dealing in a range where you're starting to see more true GMT movements become available that are proprietary, maybe even produced by the manufacturer themselves. But probably one of the most wearable GMTs on the market in the segment, while giving you a variety of dial options to choose from. Next, we shift to a GMT watch with some world time functionality with the Nomos Zurich. This is probably one of the most beautifully finished movements in the price segment. And in terms of Nomos, probably one of their best watches from a watchmaking standpoint. Nomos started back in 1990, and their rise in the past 30 plus years has been pretty remarkable in terms of what they're doing from the watchmaking side of things. Now have a whole line of in-house manufactured calibers, including the DUW caliber on the inside here, the 5201. This is a GMT movement that they've been able to adapt to have some world time functionality. How this works is you have the 24-hour disc that's sitting next to the 3 o'clock at the position next to the crown. And then you'll have a disc for all the different cities on the inside, on the outskirts of that central dial. One of my favorites, I have a full review on this watch on my review channel, so I'd recommend checking it out if you want to dive into this one a little bit deeper, because it's probably not talked about as some of these other ones on this list, but one that I would certainly recommend. And now we close out with chronographs. And for chronographs, we have to kick it off with one that is a simple no-brainer. That is the Omega Speedmaster, the Hesselite version. The Sapphire Sandwich is going to be more, but if you're going classic Speedmaster, the Hesselite might be the one for you. 42 millimeter case, thickness of 13.58 millimeters for the Hesselite version, and a lug to lug of 47 millimeters. For the dollar amount, I don't think there is luxury chronograph that delivers more value than the Omega Speedmaster, even to this day. Omega manual caliber on the inside. This is the 3861. We've seen the shift over to the coaxial calibers on the inside. Beautiful movement to look at, manual wound. The new professional line, I love the look of. The bracelet configuration and how it meets the case and those sculpted turned lugs. It's just a beautiful combination. METAS certified movement on the inside, and a watch that simply is legendary. And then for the final watch on our list here, this is a newer consideration in this price range. This is the TAG Heuer Carrera glass box at 39 millimeters. Now this watch has some tough competition with the previously mentioned Speedmaster, but in terms of one of the options, one of the very good options in this $6,000 price range for a chronograph, this absolutely has to be mentioned. I was pretty blown away by this release from TAG Heuer. Not that it did anything, crazy, unique, and different, but just how this one delivered on returning to form of previous Heuer while still infusing the current era of Tag Heuer within it. I thought the size is a great fit for what was potentially missing from Tag Heuer in the Career line. 39 millimeters, thickness still pretty reasonable despite that box section sapphire crystal. So if you're dealing with a smaller chronograph, a very wearable chronograph, this has to be on the list regardless of price segment. Also getting water resistance of 100 meters, outdoing that of the Speedmaster. And then on the inside, the Tag Heuer TH2000. Column wheel integrated chronograph movement beating away at 4 hertz. Also for this movement, you're getting an 80-hour power reserve, and then on the dial, you have that outer lip that the minute track is gonna be on the inside, and then the tachometer on the outside creates a very different visual effect with the dome crystal on top. All right, guys, well, that's my list looking at the definitive picks for luxury watches at $6,000. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. That really does help. Also, definitely check out teddybaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. How we're able to fund all of these productions is through selling watches on our site. So if you are in the market for a watch, we'd love to have your business, and would allow us to keep doing what we're doing here, and we love what we do. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.